Welcome to our webinar, How to Optimize Brain Health and Memory. I want this to be truly of value to you. Every week I see people in my current position with a healthcare company where I know that the things that I want to share with you today, if they would be implemented, even just a short time before, it might make a significant difference in terms of what people are actually experiencing. Every day we probably see on the television the pharmaceutical companies are advertising for some medication for cognitive decline and memory loss. And, the point is there's just so much science, some of which I'll share with you today, that really is pointing to the fact that we understand so much more about the cause of memory decline, of dementia, of other neurodegenerative illnesses, but that research coming out of major university medical centers is just not making its way quickly enough into the actual practice of medicine. And so what I'd like to do today is be able to share some information that I think will be very valuable for you. I certainly hope that it will be. But first of all, we have to understand a little more deeply about the problem that we're facing, that Americans are really less healthy than we used to be, and the next generation, unfortunately, maybe even worse off. We're a nation that spends more on health care by far than any other country, twice as much per capita on health care as the average developed country. And in spite of the fact that we're spending more, we actually achieve far less. In nearly every major cause of premature death, the U.S. fares far worse than its economic peers. In terms of measures of life expectancy, good health between 1990 and 2010, as reported in the Journal of the American Medical Association, we've declined in terms of where we've gone from 14th place, which was never particularly good, to 26th place. And unfortunately, medical treatment itself is the third leading cause of death. This means that the result of medical treatments, mistakes, accidents, the overprescribing of medications, this is, after heart disease and cancer, the leading cause of death. Now, we obviously know that there's very important value from conventional medical treatment, particularly in very emergencies and situations where intervention is immediately necessary. But in terms of chronic disease and how we're handling the problem, there's just a tremendous gap between what we know from the science and what's actually being implemented. One of the major people that I've been following over these years is a healthcare economist and senior advisor for the Kaiser Permanente Foundation, Dr. David Eddy, who reported in 2006 that as a result of his studies, there was really no real science to support 75 to 80% of what doctors were doing. And he said, quote, "The problem is that we don't know what we're doing." Many widely used treatments are actually not necessarily any better, and they can be many times more expensive than even a safer alternative. So in the context of that situation, we see these epidemics of Alzheimer's and dementia, Parkinson's, MS, multiple sclerosis, autism, ADD, ADHD, these neurodegenerative disorders have become epidemic in the United States. And what is a neurodegenerative disease? Well, this is really an umbrella term for the progressive loss of structure or function of the neurons. These are the nerve cells, including the death of these. And these nerve cells, these neurons, through the brain and the central nervous system, they emit a tremendous amount of energy. So you can see here on the left the normal brain, and then with severe memory loss, the lights just go out. And it's dementia itself, it's not just a disease of old age. We're now seeing that up to 5 to 10% of the people diagnosed with dementia have what's called early onset. They're in their 40s and 50s. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look at brain cells themselves and the brain cell networks. I mean, eventually, the whole purpose of these networks is to have an electrical nerve impulse travel throughout the brain and this neural network. And this is a kind of close-up view of the space between the end of one nerve cell and the beginning of the next. And this is all a very complex and fascinating biology involving neurotransmitters, all of which is to transmit electromagnetic signals from one nerve cell to the next. And these very sophisticated and complex interactions can easily be disrupted by toxins and stress hormones, as we'll talk about a little later. So how do we approach the issue of the cause of dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases? So certainly, particularly with regard to dementia, Alzheimer's, while age, family history, and heredity are all risk factors, the leading edge research is revealing other factors that we are able to influence. And this is the whole science. It's a new science of what we call epigenetics. Epi means beyond. So we're talking about the factors beyond our genetic information that's essentially hereditary, which reveals the influence of factors outside of our genes, which is affected by our lifestyle, by choices that we make about what kind of food we're going to eat, about whether or not we're going to exercise, even our thoughts, emotional states. These are all acting on the genes and affecting what's known as gene expression. So according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the World Health Organization, 80% of chronic disease is preventable. And yet we spend, for every healthcare dollar, approximately 75 cents is spent on treating and managing, even though only 5 cents out of every dollar is actually spent on prevention. So when we really look at the science, which is trying to understand more about the cause of these diseases, we see that there's a new perspective on the issue of dementia and Alzheimer's. We see a link between diabetes, heart disease, and elevated cholesterol. And now, back in 2009, the American Medical Association's American Medical News was talking about treating metabolic disorders. This may aid neurologic health. And what are metabolic? Metabolic means cellular. It means the biochemical, bioelectric activity, processes at the cellular level, the metabolism, the way the cells of the body, these 70 to 100 trillion cells that make up all parts of our body, and certainly the brain cells, the neurons that affect our central nervous system and our brain. All of this has to be understood in the context of a metabolic disorder. And the name of the condition that is now being understood more and more, actually over the last 15, 20 years, is known as the metabolic syndrome. This is the metabolic link between diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and the latest research is pointing to the connection of this metabolic syndrome caused by the spiking of blood sugars with Alzheimer's, other dementias, depression, and ADD and ADHD. So what is the fundamental cause of this epidemic of brain and neurodegenerative disease? Well, to understand the solution to this crisis, we have to have a correct understanding of the root cause of the problem. And this really has to do with what is really not at this point surprising, but Time magazine had a cover story on the surprising link between inflammation and heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases. And current research is confirming that this inflammatory response to toxicity and stress, what they call the inflammation syndrome, chronic inflammation, that this is linked to all kinds of problems involving our brain and nervous system and our emotional state as well. So the important thing about understanding inflammation is that it really is unlike the sprained ankle or the bruised elbow, which is an acute inflammation which heals after a relatively short period of time. The chronic inflammation is like a smoldering fire within us at the cellular level. It's from the ongoing persistent injury to the cells, which leads to a chronic low-grade inflammatory reaction, kind of like a fire. And the whole idea is to understand it and quench that fire before it becomes a blaze, which requires that 911 call and the visit to the emergency room at 3 in the morning. So disease, whether it's cardiovascular disease or diabetes, all of these diseases, and certainly the brain diseases, the neurodegenerative diseases, the dementias, the cognitive decline, it all begins at the cellular level with a disturbed metabolism, biochemistry, bioelectrical activity resulting from chronic low-grade inflammation and accelerated cellular decay as a response to injury. So what is driving it? What's causing the injury? Well, actually, it's not rocket science. It's the fact that we're eating so much processed food, and particularly the sugars and the processed wheat flour, this hyper-processed, hyper-addictive, factory-made industrial food makes us fat and sick by creating disordered metabolism, and this happens throughout the body. Here we see Wheat Belly by Dr. Davis and Grain Brain by Dr. Perlmutter. These best-selling books are really talking about the influence of wheat and sugar on our metabolism and how it's affecting our hearts, how it's affecting our blood vessels, how it's affecting our brains. Then there's the issue of environmental toxicity. There's the issue of stress and how this is affecting brain function decline. Molecular Psychiatry, 2014, chronic stress can damage brain structure and connectivity. Chronic stress and high levels of cortisol create long-lasting brain changes. So the connection between the food that we're eating, the toxicity that we're exposed to, and stress, these are the fundamental drivers of the inflammation in the body, in the brain, which is driving our healthcare crisis. So what is needed then is a comprehensive approach to reverse this accelerated brain cell aging. And of course it begins with just a real food diet, just eating foods which are real, which are in their natural state, which haven't been processed. I mean, this itself is the subject of another webinar to talk about the anti-inflammatory diet. But then there's also the understanding that the brain, in a sense, is connected very, very deeply to our gastrointestinal system, that in the digestive system, they're calling it a second brain, the brain in your gut. This is revolutionizing medicine's understanding of the links between how we are digesting our food and our mood and health, and even the way that we think, our memory. All of this is interconnected because the digestive system is where the nutrients are coming in, where toxicity first causes inflammation. And so the key is really having a healthy gastrointestinal system. Here's more science on this gut-brain connection, of the ability of the gut microorganisms, what they call the microbiota, to communicate with the brain, and thus modulate behavior. It's emerging as a exciting concept in health and disease. This is all coming from the latest science, the latest medical journals. And inflammation in the brain, just like inflammation in the digestive system, that leaky gut, there's a comparable kind of leaky brain syndrome. And again, it's all fundamentally based on inflammation, and it begins in the gut and digestive system, and then it affects every part of the body. That's why fortifying your gastrointestinal system with healthy bacteria, taking probiotic supplements, eating probiotic foods, sauerkraut and kimchi, fermented vegetables, even some prebiotic foods like artichokes, garlic, beans, onions, asparagus, that helps these friendly bacteria in the gastrointestinal system to maintain the healthy balance, to maintain the proper digestive function, to reduce the inflammation. It all begins in the gut. And then, of course, the need for the essential fats. We were told for 40 years that the reason we're becoming obese is because we're eating too much fat. Well, the trans fats, yes, the hydrogenated oils are very bad, but there's the saturated fats, the healthy ones. There's the essential fats, which the body cannot make unless it's taken in through the diet. So the importance of omega-3s and vitamin D, all the science is talking now about the impact of vitamin D in our health. It's more of a, vitamin D in a sense is more of a hormone than it is a vitamin. It functions as a chemical messenger in just a multitude of ways. Acetyl-L-carnitine. This is an amino acid that protects the brain cells against free radical damage, what's called oxidative stress, and neurotoxicity. And all of this here, the Journal of Neurological Research is talking about the implications of this for Alzheimer's disease. Resveratrol. They're looking at not only how it benefits the heart, but how it can improve blood flow in the brain. And then there are foods that you can add to your diet. The herb turmeric, which has as its most important ingredient curcumin, and how important this can be. Here, reading from the University of Maryland Medical Center, its powerful antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and circulatory effects may help prevent and treat neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and other conditions. This is coming out of major university medical centers. Coconut oil. You can add coconut oil to your diet. And the consumption on a daily basis of a high-grade quality coconut oil. Here in the Neurobiology of Aging, they're talking about this can lead to immediate improvement in brain function in patients with milder forms of Alzheimer's. Then if it's going to help those folks with the milder forms of Alzheimer's, it must have a benefit in terms of reducing the risk of cognitive decline to begin with. We did talk a little bit earlier about toxicity as one of the major drivers of inflammation, and that's why it's so important to be able to use nutrients that that support the natural detoxification mechanisms throughout the body. And because we not only want to reduce the exposure to toxins, but we also want to help the body to eliminate those toxins that have already been embedded within the tissues and the cells. And of course, this gets into another whole area of which supplements do we take. The supplements are not all created equal. All these manufacturers are free to put on the labels what they say is in there without necessarily having any evidence that what is in the bottle is actually represented by what's on the label. And then you've got the issue of the purity of the product and whether or not it has sufficient biological activity, whether or not it's standardized from one capsule or one tablet to another. And the reason why I work only with companies that really serve the health professional community is that physicians are constantly using nutrients in their practice. So there's a natural feedback mechanism which you don't get when you just go and purchase a product because perhaps it's the most economical or because the label suggests that it's what you'd be looking for. We really have to be able to become more sophisticated in terms of being able to distinguish between what's really going to benefit us and what's only going to be serving the profit interests of the companies. In addition to the whole diet and nutritional aspect, we have, of course, exercise and how important that is to keep the body moving. The body was created to move, so whether it's the yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, everyday movement, or anything that you would find that you would enjoy doing. And all of this helps to support the circulation, the detoxification. One of the areas that I'm particularly interested in because of the very strong science is the ways in which now we can improve the microcirculation through electromagnetic field technology. This is based on the underlying bioelectromagnetic energy fields of the body that are deeper to the biochemistry and deeper to the structure of the body. This is the energy that we pick up through an electrocardiogram when we're measuring the energy of the heart, or an electroencephalogram when we're picking up the energy of the brain. This means that the human body is itself an electrobiological system, and new technologies, they've already been developed for diagnosis. For example, with regard to an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging is used widely for diagnosis, but these same technologies can be used also for promoting healing, pain relief, stress reduction. And this is an exciting area because it's taking the science that's coming from the university medical centers and developing technology to be able to actually impact before we have chronic disease or to help to reverse it. It actually, particularly the devices that I've been educating people about, it began with research on the Russian space cosmonauts who faced serious health challenges when these early space explorers left the natural pulsating electromagnetic fields of the Earth and came back with all kinds of bone loss and muscle atrophy. And so one particular benefit of this kind of electromagnetic field technology is its impact on cellular health by improving the circulation at the level of the cells. You can use these technologies for full body application as well as in local areas of inflammation. And microcirculation really refers to the 74,000 miles of capillaries, which along with the 24%, which is the large vessels, the arteries and veins, represent our 100,000 miles of blood vessels. So arteries and veins, this is what we call the macrocirculation, 24% of the 100,000 miles of blood vessels. 74% is the 74,000 miles of capillaries. And these capillaries run throughout the body. They're what actually feeds and provides the oxygen and the nutrients to the cells and the tissues, and then allows waste products to actually leave the cells and the tissues and eventually be removed from the body. So when we consider the strength of the heart, as powerful as it is as a muscular organ for pumping the blood, the heart alone could never be able to pump through 100,000 miles of blood vessels. And so there's these precapillary sphincters that are like little muscular, they expand and contract and help the blood to move through the capillary network. And you can see here in this one diagram over on the left that where that arrow is, there's not particularly good flow through that particular section of the capillary, but by improving with electromagnetic technology, safely and effectively improving the circulation through those capillaries, which means with improved microcirculation, increased oxygen, increased nutrition, greater elimination of toxins from the body. So this is the wave of the future, and we also have to focus on stress and its impact on brain health as well. Neuroplasticity is the new term that is used to define the changes in the neural pathways that can occur as a result of psychological states, changes in behavior, environment, even moods and attitudes. There can be changes in the neural pathways. And this has replaced, the concept of neuroplasticity has replaced the concept that the brain is a static organ. We now know that, like every other part of the body, the brain can recover, that there can be new pathways created. And one of the areas that I'm particularly interested is the impact of the mind on the body. Here, Dr. Schwartz, the research professor of psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine, in his book, The Mind and the Brain, talks about the influence of focusing attention away from negative attitudes and behaviors towards positive ones that people were able to make permanent changes to their own neural pathways. So there's nothing more effective at creating nothing is more effective at creating enduring stress relief than by learning how to use the power of your own mind to work on your behalf. So many of the times our mind is actually working against our health and well-being, and we can learn how we can utilize the power of the mind and the mind-body connection to support stress relief, to support greater energy, greater vitality, a greater sense of health and well-being. So in summary, we want to be eating real foods. We want to support and heal the friendly community of microorganisms in the gut. We want to use the essential fats, amino acids like acetyl L-carnitine, nutrients such as resveratrol, foods such as turmeric and coconut oil. We want to support detoxification, have a regular exercise program with something that we enjoy doing, introduce electromagnetic field therapy, and certainly we want to be able to have effective and enduring stress relief. So your next step, there's so much more to be able to share, but even more important, to help you to implement. The key is not just getting information. Information has value in the sense that it points you in the right direction. The information can show you where you need to focus, what you need to, with all of the internet information, there's so much disinformation, misinformation, with things that are being told through the television. There's so much commercialization. There's so much effort to sell people things, to sell children cereals, which are actually, unhealthy for them. But we need to be able to understand what is really based on science, what is really true, what is really going to help us. So that's what information does. It gives us a framework, a direction that we need to go. But we need to implement. That's the key. To get the benefit of the information, we have to implement. So in order to do that, please consider having a personal telehealth video consultation so that I can support you in your health goals, answer questions you may have, give you the tools, the resources. My particular focus and interest is in stress relief, because that is where we affect our consciousness, and with our consciousness then everything else opens up to us in terms of changing behaviors, of changing habits, of really understanding things on a deeper level, on a more comprehensive level. So I hope that this was of value to you. I know we kind of covered a lot of information. I hope it didn't go by too quickly for you, but I wish you the very, very best. And here's my contact information if you want to be in touch. And I do offer a complimentary 15-minute consultation just to be able to answer some questions, and again let you know what the regular half-hour consultations would involve. So feel free to be in touch with me about that as well. Have a wonderful day. I wish you the very best of good health and happiness. Thank you.